Well, good morning to all who are joining us for our Advent series, Waiting in Faith with the Wisdom of Henry Nouwen. We've devised this series with leaders from the Center for Spiritual Growth to help us kind of have a slightly different feel for this forum. The last number of weeks we had a little bit more lecture style. So today we have something more that we envisioned as a fireside chat. So you may have to just visually, imaginatively envision the fireside part of it. But we thought we wanted to have this be a little bit more intimate, a little bit more casual, a little bit more of a conversation between some of our leaders of the Center for Spiritual Growth and those of us who are able to be here in person. And then those joining us from home, you're welcome to send your comments or questions to us, and we will try to share them if the interwebs send them to us in the right time. And also online on the live stream page, you can download the PDF of the handouts for the next 3 weeks. We put those all together. And so I'm very excited to welcome Dominica Rafferty and Louise Haley, who will be leading us in our first week's conversation on the theme of hope. And for those of you who don't know much about Henry Nouwen or haven't had a chance to read much of his work, this will be a wonderful introduction into his wisdom. At the end of the time, you can come up and borrow one of the books that is stacked up here. These are all from the Center for Spiritual Growth's collection of Henry Nouwen. So you can borrow one of those for a few weeks if you would like. My favorite Henry Nouwen is probably Life of the Beloved. And so my family and I, we've bought probably 25 copies of this book and given them all away over the years. It's that good. So there's several others. I'm sure Dominica and Louise may talk about particular ones that they connect with. And we'll turn it over to the two of you. So thank you.
Thank you, for Henry Nouwen. And Domenica's going to respond to the statement that I make, and I'll do back and forth. But what we'd like you to do is think about what we said or read about and respond to us. So I'll start. Optimism and hope are radically different attitudes. Optimism is the expectation of things, the weather, human relationship, the economy, the political situation, and so on, will get better. Hope is trust that God will fulfill God's promises to us in a way that leads us to true freedom. The optimist speaks about concrete changes in the future. The person of hope lives in the moment with the knowledge and trust that all of life is in good hands.
Thank you. And I personally I love so much of what Henry Nouwen has said, but I really love this because as an optimist myself, it resonates with me on many levels, but one of them is where it says, and an optimism is the expectation that things will get better. Well, sometimes they won't get better. I mean, even for a diehard optimist like myself, sometimes it's just not going to get better. That terrible diagnosis isn't going to change. That person that you love who died is not going to come back to life. So it will not get better. But we still have this incredible gift of hope. That's one of the many gifts that God has given us. And when we're aware of this hope and we connect with that hope in our heart, or we open our hearts to experience this hope, then it helps us not only in the moment when we're suffering or confused or frightened or scared, but it helps us in every moment to trust, as it says here, trust that all of our life, even the bad moments, even the sad moments, even the moments when our optimism won't carry us, we still have that hope that allows us to trust that all of our life is in God's hands. And so That's why I particularly like that. Anybody here does that resonate with anyone, or anyone want to comment or respond on that?
So many logistics. So I wanted to actually ask maybe a question, because my mom is going through dementia, and there's not a lot of optimism there. It's a known path. But with the hope piece, you're saying that even as we go through this, that we'll be okay, we'll be cared for through the journey, even though we would have chosen another outcome. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, that's exactly how I see it, Amy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry about your mom.
Oh, well, yeah, it's not a good disease, but it is nice to think about it with
Yeah.
the constant care through it, even though it doesn't change.
Exactly. That even though we can't cling to the hope of, oh, she'll get better, we can cling to the hope that, well, God is in charge. He's cradling her. He has her in his loving arms. And if you sometimes I just picture those arms that are holding us, his loving arms, will never, ever let us go. And it's just such an incredible comfort and something that I can then hope in.
Just wanted to comment on how hope, what caught my eye was how hope is in the present, so that we are living now with hope, whereas optimism is always forward-looking. So we have hope here and now.
Yeah.
So that's
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want me to repeat everything Amy said, or? Okay. Okay, so what Jane just said is that one of the gifts of hope is that it's in the moment, whereas optimism is looking forward. Hope sustains us in each and every moment, which I think is really... Sorry, I know that was a paraphrase of what you said, but... Anybody at home, any comments? Or, oh, yes, Jeremy.
So our theme this year is Faith Matters, and hope is an essential ingredient of faith. From Hebrews 11:1 we read, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." So it's they're intimately intertwined, hope and then ultimately faith.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I love that.
you.
If
Anybody
there's
else?
no more comments,
That particular one?
then I'll read the second quote that we had chosen out from Henry Nouwen. We live in a world where people don't know much about hope. We know about wishes. The whole Christmas period is full of wishes. I wish that, or I want that. It's very concrete. I want a toy or a car or a new job. These are all very specific requests. But hope is precisely to say, I don't know how God is going to fulfill his promises, but I know that he will. And therefore, I can live in the presence with the knowledge that he is with me. I can then know and trust that the deepest desires of my being will be fulfilled. This way keeps the future very open.
I often think of hope and wishes almost together. And reading this, I became aware that there's a separation out there from wishes. I wish to win the lottery. I'm never going to hope for that kind of silliness or whatever it is. But knowing that in my heart, knowing that the Spirit lives within me, that there is always, again, like Domenica was saying, hope. There is always something present while we can actually do look forward. So it's a place to stay, but a place to go forward from. It involves both love, because you have to have faith, you have to have love, and you have to have hope, which is, I guess, I didn't think much about hope until I really started looking at it and realized that it truly is part of who each of us is. I often think, oh, I have love, but I don't realize that I really do have hope. And when I read that he is with me, I realize that I am going to be hopeful for whatever comes forward. So that's just my read on that.
Oh, I love that comment about hope is a place where we stay and then go forward from. I love that.
Thanks. We'd love to have anybody respond to what.
You can take your mask off if you want.
Again, similar logistics, right? What Jeremy said had me think about a question that a friend asked me this past week, and we were talking about the world and about what happened in Wisconsin with the parade, and it was such a tragedy, right? And he said, but how can you always be so upbeat in the world such full of evil and destruction? And I said, well, I can't. For an hour I was really destroyed after that, watching that. I was like, unbelievable. It's like, welcome to Christmas. Are you serious? And then I got to thinking about it, and I'm positive because hope is the only antidote to a world full of evil for me. I had to think about it. I called him back and I said, hey, here's the answer. So, I think that's where I wind up in hope and optimism is a worldly based view, which is helpful sometimes, but other times it's not helpful,
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Hope it's funny because you used to think of the word hopeless, and then you switch it over to hope, and it becomes more fulfilling.
So this is working. To piggyback off what Jeffrey was saying, I think it's easy to be positive and hopeful because of what Maurice talked about. Like, we know that in the end, all that evil doesn't win. And so it's easy when you have the end, when you have that spoiler, to know that in the end, it isn't evil and it isn't all bad and that good wins. And so having that to fall back on and to live on is hugely helpful to be positive. Like, I don't know how Christians are positive or non-Christians are so positive. I don't, because I think that, like, there's just so much bad and ugliness, and it's overwhelming at times. But to know that in the end, none of that wins out and you don't have to live with that for eternity, like, that's huge for me, at least.
I think that's really wonderful. And I think the simple fact when you say someone who, a Christian, how do we survive? I think we, human beings, carry certain things with us. What we call God could be hope. Do you know what I mean? And people who may not believe in Jesus and anything else at all still can carry that in their heart. And that's what's given a gift, of love, of faith, of hope. That is part of who we are. And that's where the gift of God comes from.
There was a message online from Susan, and it said, hope, the belief that what you desire is possible. I think it differs fundamentally from trust, is what she said. The belief of what you desire is possible. I think it differs fundamentally from trust.
Trust is knowing, but a concrete knowing. That's from evidence and from what we have learned. Hope is something we don't know, but we know. How would we even describe? I was trying to use an example, but it's very difficult. Like I said, if I trust something, I know that this is from, like I said, evidence and experience.
Right.
Hope doesn't give us experience or evidence, but we know inside that it's there. I don't know if that's
I mean, that makes sense to me. That's how I've always seen trust, as a result of, it's evidence-based, like you said. Like one little thing builds on another, like if you're, deciding if you can trust in someone's character.
Yeah.
One behavior and then another behavior builds on that. Whereas hope is, like you said,
It's there.
It's based on
It's
faith. It's how you feel. It's
based
something
on
you're willing to believe. And
But there's a knowledge, like I said, I think we all have a knowledge inside that we just know. That's what I think we were given, a gift of knowing. It's not the sixth sense, it's not the five senses, it's simply knowledge that we were born with.
were you going to say? Yes.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that hope is intimately tied with trust, because as we trust evidentially on God, we experience little bits of God, and we then see his character and trust in that, and then that builds and builds and builds. And so hope in that sense is built on trust.
Trust. Yeah. Basically, it sounds like you're saying is hope first, learned, and we learn to trust using the hope. It's like it builds on itself.
You guys hit on something I wanted to just highlight again. Nowen was a big follower of Ignatian spirituality, and when you talk about that inner sense, Ignatius would call that a movement of the spirit, and it's actually getting into some felt wisdom that we're all born with, these sort of spiritual movements of it's not a mood or emotion, but it's something that comes up from deep inside. And I just wanted to sort of highlight that, because I think that's a different way, and that hope does come from that place, or can come from that place.
Does anybody have any other about the second statement? I'll read the third one, and Domenico will respond. When we live with hope, we do not get tangled up with concerns for our wishes to be fulfilled. So too, our prayers are not directed toward the gift, but toward the one who gives it. Our prayers might still contain just as many desires, but ultimately is not a question of having a wish come true, but of expressing an unlimited faith in the giver of all good things. We wish that, but you hope for, in the prayer of hope, there are no guarantees asked, no conditions posed, and no proofs demanded. You expect everything from the other without binding the other to any other. Hope is based on the premise that the other gives only what is good. Hope includes an openness where you wait for the promise to be delivered, even though you never know when, where, or how this might happen.
So again, I love that, but that's because of my personality, and it works well with me. Just like I often don't need to know when is it going to happen or what's going to happen, but just having, as Amy said, just this inner, almost physical feeling of it's okay because God's in charge and what will happen. Hope is based on the premise that the other gives only what is good, that perhaps I won't understand it, perhaps it won't feel good in the moment, but it will be good, and as long as I'm open to receiving this gift, it gives me a great sense of peace. Kind of almost what we expect from our children, those of us who have children, right? There are so many times when we'll look at our children and they might be objecting to bedtime, or they may be objecting to having to eat breakfast, but we know that what we're offering them and giving to them is ultimately for their good, and we're expecting them to just trust in that and to come to us completely like, okay, Mom, now what? And we know that what we're giving to them is good. Yes? No? Any comments? I see you shaking. Do you want the microphone? No. Any feedback from people on Zoom? Oh, Jeremy wants the microphone. Good. Thank you.
So that reminds me a bit of the gospel reading today, where essentially Jesus is saying that you don't know when I'm coming back. It's going to be amazing, so be ready. Don't be falling down drunk or burdened with the cares of this world. Live with a sense of purpose and urgency. Hope for the second coming or the coming of Christ. Look forward to it. Spoiler alert, he's coming. Because we don't know when it's coming, we need to have sort of the sense of readiness and anticipation, and then live that way. Tell others, evangelize, as Frank said. Bring folks to the live pageant. Share the good news. So live with that sense of purpose, urgency, because we have hope that it's going to be dramatic and amazing, and we're blessed that we get to be part of it, and let's share that sense of hope with others.
Exactly.
Thank you. That was really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, and I love what you said about living with that sense of purpose and having that. And when you said that, it reminded me about 25 years ago when all the kids were still home and we were trying to sell our house. And back then, the realtor would just call and say, I'm going to bring somebody over. So we coined this phrase like, the house has to be realtor ready. And we had to literally change the way we lived, even if it meant, I remember one day the house was not realtor ready. So we literally went around the house with trash bags and scooped everything up and put it out in the van in the driveway and made the house realtor ready. And then we learned from there, okay, so we have to live expecting that she just might call anytime, but meantime, we still have to do our homework. We still have to come down to dinner when mommy and daddy say so. We still have to be kind to each other, and we still have to play with our toys, but we have to do it in a way that we're hoping that she's going to call, and we have to be ready. And it's kind of how we have to live now. And then telling people, we keep our house realtor ready. So it's kind of like now, we're living in the hope. We don't know when he's coming, but we can live our lives in ways that we're living the best way we can to honor him and sharing with other people that we're waiting for him to come eventually. But
Could you, I'd love to hear maybe you talk a little bit about that sort of sense of time with hope. Because I'm thinking of, that at various points in history, various groups of Christians have thought Jesus was coming back so soon that they stopped getting married, stopped having children, stopped working the fields, or built really poor construction because they're like, this house or this shed or this church only needs to last 3 years, 10 years, because Jesus is around the corner and coming, right? That there's a lot of discussion that much of what we've done with our care of God's creation is this poor care of it, thinking that Jesus is coming back soon. So we don't really need to take care of the earth that well if Jesus is gonna destroy it and make it all better. So I'd love to hear, right, we're now 2,000 years later and Jesus still has not returned in glory. And how do we put together that sort of sense of the realtor could be coming in 10 minutes versus daily life, you had to keep going. I'd love to hear you both talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I've always seen it as that God is the author of time. He's in charge of time, and it's not for us to try to understand. I don't see God's time as linear. I just see it as it's God's time. And sometimes there's no explanation for what can happen in a minute or what can happen in an hour. And going back to what I said about getting ready for the realtor, what we had to instill or live with was our first obligation is to live our lives with Christ in the center. So to live our lives with integrity, so to live our lives as honestly as we can, to do the best that we can in every situation while keeping things prepared. So getting back to what you said about taking care of the environment or building things, if you're living from the premise of, I need to do the absolute best I can, I need to live with integrity, then I'm going to build as sound and as good as a house as I can. I'm going to do the best I can in every situation, because I don't know when he's coming, but I do know that in the time I have, I need to live with as much integrity as possible, which also goes back to taking care of the environment as well.
I agree 100%. What you're saying. I view it as I mix up words, optimism with hope, wishes with hope. I often say, semantics. But in actuality, semantics is very important. And optimism is linear time, the way you were talking about. Optimism, wishes. You have a linear time. You want this to happen within our time, the human time, from Monday to Wednesday. You know what I mean? And this is when it should happen. I don't think that the eternal time, there is no time. So therefore, we always say, or I know many times they'll be like, I've known people who say, yes, God's coming at, October 23rd, at 10 a.m. And that's a linear time. He does not live, he, her, she, everyone does not live in a linear time. So why worry about that? Because he may not show up in linear time. He may be showing up now and we don't even know that, because we're hanging out here in linear time. So we might be missing things. So again, hope comes from knowing he's already here. Maybe not coming in glory with, the big sword and, the idea of what we have of him coming down with all the angels behind him and everything else. But I'm kind of happy to just know he's already here. I'll be impressed if he comes in with a big sword. I'll be definitely impressed with a parade type of thing. But then I am always impressed with a parade. So. Are we going to go back to?
Yeah. Anything? Any other comments, questions? All right. Well, we'll go to number 4. If you live with hope, you can live very much in the present, because you can nurture the footprints of God in your heart and life. You already have a sense of what is to come, and the whole of the spiritual life is saying that God is right with us right now, so that we could wait for his coming, and this waiting is a waiting in hope. But because we wait with hope, we know that what we are waiting for is already here. We have to nurture that. Here and now matters, because God is a God of the present, and God is God of the present because he is God of eternity.
You already stole that from me.
I was going to say
the nurturing thing.
You already said that.
I'm teasing. That's what, when I read this and was going in the response and looking at this, it is the word nurture comes to mind. Nurturing is building. It's bringing together. It's holding. And that's what a lot of hope is. It's the building. It's kind of holding, nurturing, and bringing something that is already there into full being. I feel that, again, I go back to the knowledge that he's already with us, that God, the Holy Spirit, everybody, all the spirits is within us. So therefore, the hope that we have is not so much, again, linear, but moving toward a raising up. And the part of the raising up, I think, is raising up each other with hope. Because not everybody's going to be hopeful at any given time. So if we carry hope with us, we can carry our hope and carry another person along with that. And that's what I view as nurturing.
2 comments online. So the first one is, to get through to the other side of the woods, you have to walk through them. Hope and faith carry us through the unknowns of that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other comment.
Very profound.
Yeah. Hope allows us to let go and let God.
That's, you know, I think one of my favorite statements is, I believe it's Julian of Norwich. All will be well, all will be well, all will be well. And I think that's a sense of hope. When you say God is always with us, that's what I think they're saying, that all is well. Sometimes I don't say that, but then I need somebody else to help me along with that hope.
Right, or sometimes when things aren't well, you know that all will be well.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the nurturing. It's like I said, I feel the word nurture, whenever I think of that, it is not just nurturing myself, but it is with others. Because there's always other human beings involved with nurturing. So.
And sometimes it's hard to nurture. I mean, sometimes if you have a baby that's been crying for 2 hours because they're really colicky, and you just keep holding them and hugging them and rocking them and walking, why are you doing that? Because you're hoping that eventually they won't feel so colicky. Mm-hmm. Eventually they'll stop crying. Eventually they'll feel the warmth of your body loving them, right? Yeah. So while you're nurturing them, you're living in hope. But it's not always easy.
No.
Right?
No one's ever said it's going to be easy.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes, Emily.
I think what I love about the Julian of Norwich saying or wisdom to us is, she says, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. There's like nothing off the table of what can be just cared for and taken care. Sometimes I think we're really good at compartmentalizing our lives. Like, these are the things that I'll like pray about, and here's just the stuff I'm not even going to pray about because it's just a hot mess. But I think with the invitation in that is that there's like nothing outside of what God cares about in our lives. Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else about that? I'll go to number 5 then. How can anyone ever trust in the existence of an unconditional divine love when most, if not all, of what he or she has experienced is the opposite of love: fear, hatred, violence, and abuse? They are not condemned to be victims. There remains within them, hidden as it may seem, the possibility to choose love. They are not condemned. There remains within them, hidden as they may seem, the possibility to choose love. All the great spiritual leaders of history were people of hope. Abraham, Moses, Ruth, Mary, Jesus, Rumi, Gandhi, and Dorothy Day all lived with a promise in their hearts that guided them toward the future without the need to know exactly what it would look like.
So again, I feel like that's reinforcing what we've been saying, that we don't always need to know what the ending is. We don't need to have that spoiler, as Marie said. I mean, it's a nice reinforcement, a reminder, but we don't always need to have it. But what we do need to cling to or know is how God's love will never, ever, ever fail us, and God's love will never end for us. And it, at least for me, gives me the energy or to live in that hope that the future, that there's always hope, and that his love will always be there guiding us in the future. And yeah, we don't need to know what the future will look like. I know there's many times in my life where I'm glad I didn't know what the end of the story was going to be or how it was going to work out, because I probably wouldn't have chosen that path or had the courage to do such and such, and then, see how but by doing one step at a time and one day at a time and living in God's, soaking up his love and clinging to the strength of his love and his hope every single day, I was able to walk through this day, walk through the next day without knowing what the ending would look like.
I'd love to. I love this list of people, right? It's so funny to see what someone puts down as their spiritual leaders, and this idea of people of hope, and how that connects kind of back to the quote before it of God of the present and eternity. right? Is that these people had to face their particular present moments and act in whatever way they felt God was calling them there, with the hope that it had meaning for eternity. And during the children's sermon time, kind of talking with the kids about, I love talking about time with our faith, right? Like, we hope for Jesus coming in the past. We celebrate him coming in the past. We celebrate him coming into our lives in the present. And then also at the same time, hope for him coming back in glory. But how important, right? All these people had to have great hope that God was there in the present, and that the actions they were doing were important for the present, not just the historical past or this super distant future. So,
Oh, I love that, Emily. Thank you.
I love the fact that you're saying they choosing a path, moving forward with it within time, but not having any idea what's going to be what they will accomplish in many ways. Because a lot of times we don't know what we're going to accomplish, if we're going to accomplish anything. And again, we live with a hope and a faith that hopefully we will be able to have meaning and express meaning in our own linear lives.
Thank you. Hi guys, my name's Anthony. This one makes me think of Job.
Of what?
Of Job, the story of Job.
Yeah.
And I mean, everything went wrong, but he still had that hope. And I mix up faith and hope, but like faith is that confidence in the hope that you have, I guess. So he kept going through regardless of that belief, but you don't know how God's going to do it for you, of what you're hoping for. So one of the things, I guess, that comes to mind a lot is we're always hoping for something that we want, but it sometimes comes in a different path than what you expect. And you should never just let God's plan come into play for you, and don't get so fixed on how you're getting there. So just have that hope that of the end result, but understand there's different ways. And like one of our testimonies is just in this crazy housing market, shopping for a house for 9 months. It took many offers, but the ones we thought that were the right one didn't come through. And then another one did, and it turned out to be that much better for our family. And we were not even looking in that area. So God had a better plan for us than what we initially had planned for ourselves. But just that hope of what you're going towards and of what you want, and having the faith and confidence in that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very true.
Anyone else? We'd love to hear any comments or questions.
I'm Patrick, and these last two readings remind me of a famous lecture or sermon given by Tony Campola, who's a professor at Eastern University, and it was a Good Friday sermon, and he's saying, today is Friday, and it's terrible, and we're at the foot of the cross, and we're seeing what Jesus is dealing with, and he's dealing with our stuff, our sin, and it's really ugly, and it's really awful. And he said, it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. And he kept repeating that over and over. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. And on Sunday, stuff is going to happen that's just so amazing, you have no idea. But so I think a lot of what we experience with God on a daily basis is more like Friday stuff, but always keeping in mind that Sunday's coming.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, I'll read quote number 6. These are all from Henry Nouwen. The story invites us to an encounter, a dialogue, a mutual sharing. As long as we have stories to tell each other, there is hope. As long as we can remind each other of the lives of men and women in whom the love of God becomes manifest, there is reason to move forward to a new land in which new stories are hidden.
I love stories. Stories to me is the best way to learn anything. And sharing stories is, Thanksgiving was a perfect time. We reiterate some of the funny stories or the stories that we did in a family. We laugh and we come sometimes get a little bit testy. But it tells us who we are in children of God. And I love the idea of, right now, this is exactly what we're doing, it's a mutual sharing. Coming into church together is a mutual sharing. Talking one-on-one, it becomes the statement, when more than one person are involved with me, I'm there. And it's like, that's absolutely true. And more often we will move forward to a greater being, when I say better being, a more understanding human being. We learn from each other's stories. So I just think stories are the most important thing to say to anybody, is tell your story and listen to somebody else's story, because then we become moving much more toward a greater idea of hope, because we know that they've survived, we've survived. What Patrick was saying, the same exact thing, is Friday, but we were all on Friday, but moving towards Sunday.
Yes?
I love the concept that there's reason to move forward to new land in which new stories are hidden. I've always been a fan of the concept of unanswered prayers, because I am very much a planner and I have a very, very good plan for how things should go with my life, and God often does not agree with my plan. But in hindsight, his is so much better. To sort of piggyback what you were saying with the housing market, we also just moved, and 3 offers got denied, like $100,000 over asking with everything denied. I'm like, what do you want from me? Like, I'll literally give you anything. My firstborn, here, have him. But where we landed was like so much more perfect, and we didn't even know it. Like, we didn't know anything about the neighborhood when we bought the house. We just were like, a house, and they'll take our offer and it'll fit our 6-person family, like, done. And it ended up being like the best neighborhood, and it has all these hidden stories that we had no idea about, but just reminding myself that God's got us, like, and his plan is definitely better than mine, but having hope in that and remembering that when when it's been 9 months and you're like, what's going on? Yeah.
This is my, monthly plug for the stories of the saints. I think, right, I love to hear our current day stories. We heard just 3 or 4 of them right now, but right, also a couple of the people that Henry Nouwen mentioned earlier, of just how people throughout time and history have lived with faith, with hope, in spite of, sometimes great challenges. And so I think that's one of the gifts the Episcopal Church gives us, is that there is some attention to the stories of saints in the past, that we can look to for those models. And so, Charles and I were at the art museum yesterday, and I always love the religious art section. And there's so many saints that we just don't know about. Like, who's Barbara? I can never remember, like, what's she holding? Something weird, or Catherine has this wheel. and just what richness their stories offer us, and that we can bring those, into the present. So,
Yeah.
I have to agree with when you're talking about is just these names of these people. Every one of these people didn't do it on their own. It was through mutual sharing. I'm sure, we always hear especially like Moses, who was like, I'm not going there. I am not going there. And I think there were a lot of people around him who helped him move into where God needed him to be by telling him their stories, giving him hope, giving him maybe strength to move to where God wants him to move to. Bye. See ya. So I think, that mutual, are we, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Will you say the prayer then, since we're moving toward time?
Okay. All right. So here's a prayer for the week. Hope means to keep living amid desperation and to keep humming in the darkness. Hoping is knowing that there is love. It is trust in tomorrow. It is falling asleep and waking again when the sun rises. In the midst of a gale at sea, it is to discover land. In the eyes of another, it is to see that you are understood. As long as there is still hope, there will also be prayer, and God will be holding you in God's hands. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all so very
Thank
much.
you so much for all of your contributions. It was great to hear your stories.
It really was.